grab your fruit and cheese and hustle on over to the table or something? Okay. All right. Well, do I have to?
No.
I project really well. I hate these sort of things. All right. So, right, good. Is it working? I don't even know. All right. So I'm Kathy Wisser, as hopefully you met me earlier, and I'm moderating this new format. And I'm actually kind of excited about this, the idea of having the opportunity to talk about things that people are actually actively working on, both in terms of research, but also out in the field. So this is called Works in Progress and Notes from the Field, and we've been referring to them as whips and knocks. So if you're a whip or a knock, either way, good to go. We have a lot of presenters, as you can see, so I'm gonna keep them to time, and we're gonna be going in the order here. So our first presenter is Kelly Fitzpatrick, and that's all I'm gonna say about the presenters. I'm gonna let them do the rest of the heavy lifting.
All right, thank you.
Here's the mic.
All right, here we go. For this work in progress, I'm going to be presenting Open Marginalis, Medieval Marginalia in Open Access. For this project, I was interested in testing the boundaries of Tumblr as a platform for digital scholarship, focusing on the accessible description, discovery, and display of digitized materials. Starting work in 2014, Open Marginalis is a selection of open access, digitized marginalia found in medieval manuscripts dating from the 5th to 15th centuries, geared towards guiding users to open access initiatives led by institutions for casual and scholarly use. This project was closely linked to boosting the visibility of digitized content released under the licenses Creative Commons by, and public domain. For this project, I chose to solely use works generated by institutions with clearly defined access initiatives, listed under the Open Knowledge Foundation's Open GLAM initiative. That acronym is, for those that don't know, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, or located through aggregates such as Wikimedia Commons. Harkening back to the primary goal of accessibility, this project aimed to adhere to a basic, consistent description standard based on the information provided by the institution of origin, reflected in the following formula, including creator, title, place of creation, date, via institution, and use term stated. So on to process and product. Design for this project was placed high priority on the viewership of materials in high resolution, made possible through the flexible themes created and made available by designers through Tumblr. Digital objects were also uploaded at the highest resolution to achieve this goal. At this stage, I've chosen to use a grid theme to best represent and achieve this goal at this stage. At this stage, I've also chosen to use a grid theme that enables mouse over description. Users can like and share content. So to give some examples, for a single object here, we see 3 precious hedgehogs as featured in an illuminated manuscript, including the title, the volume, unknown creator, England circa 13th century, via the British Library as found on Wikimedia Commons falling into the public domain. Here we've chosen to utilize hyperlinking as a tool of citation to drive users back to source as a means of finding related content and also additional metadata. As we can see in this example, if we click on the British Library, we can see a whole lot of additional metadata, which might be really useful to users seeking related content. So to look at an example that uses multiple objects, we see 4 objects from the Physician's Handbook, an English medical and astrological compendium by author unknown, England circa 1453, by the Wellcome Library, as found on Wikimedia Commons under Creative Commons. We've also chosen to take advantage of tagging functions as made available through Tumblr. In this case, we've chosen things like medicine, history, art, medieval art, science, and libraries. And this is really the way people find content aggregated through Tumblr. This is also available through also indexed by major search engines like Google. One second. Moving forward, being able to functionally transform elements of this project was a goal for Open Marginalis, Continuing with original project goals, Open Marginalis has begun experimenting with new potential display options while maintaining the same standards for description and discovery. Moving forward, I'm interested in exploring added functionality, which will enable users to search content based on its origin institution, likely incorporating the use of navigable content tags, for example, being able to toggle between institutions like the British Library or the Getty Institute. This project will continue to grow and evolve based on digitization initiatives and open access projects prompted by larger institutions. Thank you.
So much shorter than the 7 minutes it was.
Here you go.
Great, thank you. Our next presenter will be Nathaniel Gammon.
Janine.
Sorry, Janine. He gave me credit for part of this, so.
Yeah, well, now I'm taking the credit
Yeah,
back
take it back.
because, you know.
I'll just check the mic real quick.
Do you want me to close this?
I've been mispronouncing your name for a year now.
Oh, you've been talking about me and all this all the time. Hi, folks. Oh, no, don't spoilers. Where is it?
Slideshow.
Got it. No, that's new slide. This thing?
Yeah, that one.
This thing, slideshow. Okay. Okay. So I'm Metanel. I work at Emerson College, and we have a very big media department, and consequently a lot of DVDs. The problem with that is that there's 2 collections of DVDs. One is circulating, which students can use. One is non-circulating. Students cannot check them out, and there's no way in the catalog, oh no, to search by a specific collection. So students are unable to see if a DVD is something they can take out, or they're unable to limit to just DVDs I can actually take home. And the second problem that I identified with our media collection is that the ability to browse, which people like to do, serendipitous discovery, is limited because the DVDs are fixed in a physical location. Like the old school Blockbuster, if you remember, there's a single genre assigned to each movie with Library of Congress subject headings. So there's no way within the collection to browse unless you just go, there's no drama, there's no cross-genre browsing. So I want to demonstrate that. So a student comes up and has a question. I'm looking for movies directed by Steven Spielberg that I can take home. So if they did the best possible search using both the filter to just Emerson, because we are part of a consortium, so they would be getting results from all of the colleges, and they use the filter for just visual media, they would still get 47 results, which sounds great. We have 47 Steven Spielberg movies. That's not true. I went through all 47 items. 22 of them have multiple items available, which means the student would have to click through to open up a new window to see the actual call number and if it's available in the circulating collection. 31 of them are not Steven Spielberg directed. Maybe he wrote it, he's in it, he produced it, he's somehow affiliated with it. There's only 16 movies we actually have that he directed. And there would be this is the best possible filtering, and the student would have to go through 47 hits to find the 16. So I turned to my bosses and I said, I have an idea. I want something that's browsable, something that's field indexed so you could see how the person is affiliated with the resource, and something visual. Kids these days and their visuals. So I asked my bosses about a year ago, can I have some of the data? Give me the data. And they gave me marked data in Excel, and I wrote a lot of XSLT, which take an XML class because I love it and it's amazing and it's great. So I wrote a lot of code with, yes, metadata also with Kathy. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have had the idea if I hadn't taken the metadata class. And I came up with something I call Mflix, which is not yet live, but is hosted on the Emerson servers and is currently being tested. So this is what it looks like when you first get there. And as you can see, there is a big browse with all the genres. And then even within each genre, there is subgenre browsing. And all the movies are cross-assigned genres for multiple points of access. And we want to try that search again. In the search box, I'm looking for movies directed by Steven Spielberg. Well, there you go. The following items contain Spielberg in the director field. And if you'd scrolled, you'd find him as a writer, you'd find him as a creator, because we have one TV show he created, And each movie has a little hover box with some nice data. You can click on any of those to find, to co-locate all the other movies with that person's name. And that might be it. So yeah, so it's still a work in progress, but that's it.
So, good thing I'm timing things over here. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so our next presenter is Tim Walsh.
Bear with me for just one moment here. All right. As Kathy said, my name's Tim Walsh. I'm in my last semester here in the Library and Information Science Master's Program, and for my final course, I elected to do an independent study on the topic of access to born digital archival materials. More specifically, I've been considering how we as a profession might be able to preserve and provide meaningful access to outdated computer-aided design, or CAD files. Over the next few minutes, I hope to paint a portrait in broad strokes of how CAD presents a serious challenge for today's digital archivists, some steps we might be able to take with these files, and why this admittedly difficult problem is worth our attention. Libraries, archives, and museums have been collecting architectural records in the United States for more than a century. Driving this effort is a recognition that the built environment shapes and reflects our individual and collective values, ideologies, and aspirations. As the massive popularity of the podcast 99% Invisible attests, the stories behind and within architectural design are often as captivating and unexpected as they are central to our shared cultural identity. Historically, architectural output's been expressed in two forms: drawings and three-dimensional models. Sketches were refined into plans, elevations, sections, presentation drawings, and models, and then used by architects, their clients, and construction teams to envision, build, and maintain all types of physical structures. Although architectural drawings and models can be demanding to store and conserve for a variety of format-specific reasons, they do have the advantage of being relatively unmediated. While visual literacy skills and an understanding of the architectural trade is helpful, all that's truly required to interact with drawings and models is a clear line of sight and a willingness to engage. During the late 20th century, architectural modes of production were slowly but irrevocably changed with the introduction of a new tool, the computer. In 1962, while a PhD student at MIT, Ivan Sutherland invented Sketchpad, the first computer-aided design program. Within a few years, there were several such programs, and some enterprising architectural firms began using dedicated CAD terminals connected to large mainframe computers to digitize their hand-drafted drawings for machine manipulation and manufacturing. In 1982, Autodesk released AutoCAD, the first widely successful CAD program for microcomputers. By the late 80s, AutoCAD and its competitors were supporting 3D modeling, and by the mid-90s, the switch from hand drawing to designing straight in CAD programs on personal computers was well underway. Today, in most educational programs and firms, CAD and building information management systems have completely replaced hand drawing as the primary architectural tools of choice. Complex calculations that in the past required the input of specialists and engineers now happen in the background of computer programs. This computational power, in combination with 3D modeling capacities, has enabled architects to design buildings that would have been impossible in the age of hand drafting. It is no exaggeration to say that the advent of CAD has literally changed the shape of the world we live in. In a Digital Preservation Coalition report released in 2013, Alex Ball wrote the following: "The success of CAD means that a great deal of vital, valuable, and irreplaceable information is stored in CAD models, from the designs of aircraft carriers and skyscrapers to records of archaeological excavations. It also means that CAD is an area of constant innovation and intense competition between vendors, resulting in CAD systems that are ephemeral and largely incompatible with each other. It is the disconnect between these two, the value of the models and the ephemeral nature of the systems, that makes CAD preservation at once important and challenging." End quote. In addition to incompatibility between systems, I'd like to highlight a few of the other environmental and technical concerns that make CAD preservation difficult. First, CAD vendors update their products as rapidly as every 6 months and don't typically support backwards compatibility beyond 1 or 2 previous releases, meaning that files created only a few years ago may in all likelihood already be obsolete. Second, licenses for CAD software are typically time-limited, meaning that displaying files in emulated versions of their original hardware and software environments will almost always require infringement on vendors' intellectual property at some point in time. Finally, CAD models are heavily dependent on the particular modeling kernel and logic of individual system releases. In practice, this means that opening a CAD file with different software than it was created with, or even just a different version of the same software, can result in changes to the model that aren't apparent upon casual inspection. This is a lesson that the commercial world learned when, for example, delays in Airbus A380 airliner production in the mid-2000s, caused by facilities using different versions of the CAD suite CADIA, cost Airbus an estimated 4.8 billion euros. Of course, this isn't to say that CAD preservation is an entirely lost cause. There are a number of international standards already in existence or in development, including STEP, the standard for the exchange of product model data, that define open formats and protocols for vendor-neutral exchange of information between systems. The aerospace and defense industries have also been working on this issue through the LOTAR International project, which seeks to define auditable archiving and retrieval processes for 3D CAD models and similar digital data using established international standards like STEP and the OAIS reference model. As a community, archivists need to support these efforts towards standardization and advocate for both standards compliance and for open preservation licenses from CAD vendors. As individual archivists, our first step must always be to make good forensic captures of data, taking care not to change bit streams, the ones and zeros that make up files at the lowest level of abstraction, or metadata as we do so. We should aim to retain this original copy, but also to normalize files to at least one open source vendor-neutral file format, taking care to record in-model measurements like point clouds and surface areas so that we can validate our migrations. Whether we choose to migrate to a full exchange format like STEP, a desiccated format like IGES, which captures just the basic geometry of a design, or even to a PDF depends heavily on audience and anticipated use. Architectural historians, property managers, urban planners, media studies theorists, and visual artists, just to name a few, may all wish to access archived CAD models, for vastly different reasons. As such, aware of the practical limitations, we must think carefully about who our dedicated communities are and what aspects of these models are most useful for them. In closing, CAD preservation can get pretty deep as far as rabbit holes go, but I'm happy to talk or answer any questions you might have, and if this topic interests you, I'd encourage you to check out the running reading list for my independent study, which is at the URL above. Thank you.
So testing, how many crazy buildings can you put into one PowerPoint presentation?
Is that last one where you're going to be working?
I'm sorry?
Is the last one where you're going to
Oh yeah, the last one is the Canadian Centre for Architecture. I start as the visual archivist in May.
Okay, our next presenter is Allison Mitchell.
Is this okay? Okay, my presentation is called Building a Better Summer Reading Program, and I'm really passionate about this topic. I work in youth services, and also I have 2 kids, and they read. But it turns out that they hate summer reading programs. They absolutely hate writing down the books on the little list and going to the library and getting a little piece of plastic toy that usually breaks on the way home, and they really, really push back against participating in this program. So, also I noticed that the sound is kind of going in now, but the summer reading program at our library, which is an urban branch library, is very, very different from the summer reading program where I work, which is a suburban public library. And so I'm looking into kind of the differences between, I got interested in looking at the differences between different summer reading programs, and that's something I think I'm going to really continue with professionally. I'm only in the very beginning of the program now. So, why have a summer reading program, and what makes a better summer reading program? Summer reading programs are typically intended to help prevent the summer slide, which is the academic backslide that a lot of kids do when they're not in school between June and September. So that's great if it's a good program. But a better summer reading program would include programming, which I'm not talking about at all today, outreach to get kids into the program, motivation to keep them in the program, and evaluation to figure out what's working and what you could do better the next year. So outreach summer reading program participants tend to be the same. They tend to be female, white, and from higher socioeconomic levels, which means that librarians need to target all the other kids who could participate in the summer reading programs. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. Some libraries visit schools. Some libraries coordinate with schools to send home a little notice with report cards. You could work with daycare centers or community centers, things like that. There's really, you can be creative in how you get kids into your program. I know some libraries try to target demographically or by a certain neighborhood using census data. It's also, I think, important to think about the older elementary school and middle students. Those are the middle school students who kind of stop reading for pleasure around that age. But there are really innovative ways to get them into a summer reading program. One library coordinated with an arts program, so the kids were working on an art exhibit while they were doing the summer reading program. Another library in Colorado partnered with an animal rescue league, and they got a business to donate $1 for every book that was read toward this particular horse. So this was their horse, and the teams totally got into that, reading money for their horse. So I think when you get creative, there are really great ways to bring kids into your program. And then that kind of ties in with the motivation. There's two basic kinds of motivation. Extrinsic motivation is doing something because you're going to get something. That's like my kids doing the summer reading program or not doing the summer reading program because you're going to get this little plastic toy. And that typically does not work. Intrinsic motivation is doing something because you feel good about it, you're being part of the community, there's some greater reason to do it, and that's what we really want in a summer reading program, is to have the kids intrinsically motivated to participate. And that's, going back to motivation, that's trickier. You have to really be creative and think about how you're going to do your summer reading program other than just having the kids write the books down and that's the end of it. So different libraries do charts or events, or where I work, we do a little bingo board sort of things, different kinds of books that you have to read over the summer to be in the program. So, but again, it takes some creativity and a little bit of work, but the rewards are much greater. So then you need to evaluate your program and figure out what makes it successful. And that actually, first you have to decide what is success. Some libraries think success is just having kids sign up for the program. So that's great. You have 100 kids sign up for the program, none of them read any books. Is that a successful program? No. So you have to think about, what does it mean they read a certain number of books? They are participating all the way through the summer to the end. Their performance at school equals, in September, equals that where it was in June. There's lots of different ways of defining success, and I think libraries really have to decide what that is for their particular program. And then track the data that you can use. Rather than tracking just how many people sign up, track what they read, what parts of the summer they read, when could you pull in different programming, things like that. So effective evaluation. So in summary, summer reading programs can help children succeed in school, and a better summer reading program includes targeted outreach, intrinsic motivation, and thoughtful evaluation. Thanks.
No sluggish at the end of the day here. Great. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so up next we have Grace Gist.
Yes.
Gist. I'm Dr. Weiser. Can't pronounce anybody's name right. Sorry about that.
That's all right. You're not the first person.
Okay.
And I'm sure not the last either. All right, so again, my name is Grace Gist. I am a first-year SLIS student, but my presentation doesn't necessarily have to do with libraries exactly. My presentation is More Reassuring Noise in This Quiet World, Radio Drama, The Acousmatic Narrator, and Welcome to Night Vale. So this is continuation of work that I did last year as an undergraduate. Last year I undertook a project where, in addition to writing and producing my own short radio drama show, Tech and Divana, I also did analysis of radio as a literary form. Radio is usually analyzed as a cultural phenomenon, as for its communication value, but not usually as a literary form. But there's a lot of unique aspects to it, and I also looked at it in relation to a modern into a contemporary work. And I'm looking to continue that work, but here's the gist of what I'm working with. So radio is a very strange medium. By its nature, it's incredibly intimate. We only have what we hear, and we're listening to it in real time. Things are basically happening right in front of us, which means that we have a very strangely close relationship to the voices that we hear, especially to single narrators, but even just generally. People kind of talk about, it's kind of this one-sided pen-pal relationship. I've seen it talked about in relation to DJs and to talk show hosts, more subjective voices, and it's kind of almost this voyeuristic relationship, but it's usually with subjective voices, but you can also see it in objective voices. A lot of people, for instance, there was a lot of emotional outpouring, for lack of a better term, when Carl Castle, the NPR newscaster, when he announced his retirement last year. People were talking about, how his voice was the one that assured them that the world was still in one piece. It's like, that's kind of weird. But it's also it can also be used to very interesting literary effect. And that phenomenon is kind of generally encapsulated even in just the title of this New Yorker comic, Who Needs Friends When You've Got Terry Gross? So again, this phenomenon is in radio as a whole, regardless of its genre, but it's also used to great effect in radio drama. And as a particular example, I looked at the contemporary, critically acclaimed podcast, Welcome to Night Vale. It's a podcast that's in the style of a community news radio broadcast in a small desert town. But this town is kind of strange, for lack of a better term. One of the descriptions is that it was, people have described it, combining Stephen King and Neil Gaiman. People have referenced like the Twilight Zone. But to kind of give a general sense, here is a short encapsulation of it.
Old woman Josie has not called, but intern Dana said that Josie updated her Facebook page with an Instagram of some rune stones. Dana has been furiously translating these symbols, and her best guess is that they say, they come in twos, you come in twos, you and you, kill your double. There's also a link to this amazing cat that keeps jumping in and out of boxes, and oh my god, that is the cutest thing I have ever seen. Dana, you have got to post that on my wall. Oh my god, he loves those boxes so much.
As people say on the internet, that's it. That's the show. So that voice is the main voice that we hear throughout the podcast, the host of Night Vale Community Radio, Cecil. This is Cecil, or various representations of him. Now, because he's our one line into this strange world, we have very little separation between us as the listener and him as the narrator. And that's partly because of radio's natural intimacy, but there's also this other tiny complication. So this is radio host Cecil Palmer, and this is Cecil Baldwin, the actor who lends his voice to the radio host. But we're never given any indication that that radio host Cecil's last name is anything other than Baldwin up until like episode 33, which is well over a year into the podcast's run. So between the name similarity and radio's intimacy, natural intimacy, we have very little separation between us and the narrator, and which means that we have less separation between the events that he's reporting on and us perceiving them. And it's this point of analysis that I've looked at in greater depth, and I'm looking into examining further. But to give an idea, I have two instances of different degrees of separation from the same episode. So the first one is completely separated. It's not happening to Cecil, it's happening somewhere else, and probably at a different time.
And now, the news. Have any of our listeners seen the glowing cloud that has been moving in from the west? Well, John Peters, you know, the farmer, he saw it over the western ridge this morning. Said he would have thought it was the setting sun if it wasn't for the time of day. Apparently, the cloud glows in a variety of colors, perhaps changing from observer to observer, although all report a low whistling when it draws near. One death has already been attributed to the glow cloud. But listen, it's probably nothing. If we had to shut down the town for every mysterious event that at least one death could be attributed to, we'd never have time to do anything, right? That's what the sheriff's secret police are saying, and I agree. Although, I would not go so far as to endorse their suggestion to run directly at the cloud, shrieking and waving your arms, just to see what it does.
And then later in that same episode, his temporal and objective filters are compromised.
The sheriff's secret police have apparently taken to shouting questions at the glow cloud, trying to ascertain what exactly it wants. So far, the glow cloud has not answered. The glow cloud does not need to converse with us. It does not feel as we tiny humans feel. It has no need for thoughts or feelings of love. The glow cloud simply is. All hail the mighty glow cloud. All hail.
And then we're just kind of left alone, narratorless, to flounder in an empty universe for a little while. And then I'm looking to do some further analysis of moments like that, of narrative flux and other flux with different elements, both general literary importance, but also moments that are unique and peculiar to radio. Thank you very much. And then there's that final note.
Wow, technology worked.
Technology
Excellent.
worked.
Excellent. Everything's going right. Okay, so our next presenter is Stephanie Gilbert. Did I get that right? You got it right. Great. Put it on Gilbert. I went from yes, and it was Gilbert.
Yeah. All right, so a lot of you are aware of the We Need Diverse Books campaign that really started conversations going all throughout the summer of 2014. And a lot of blogs that I was following at the time had really interesting discussions about this movement. And in particular, some of the ideas that arose out of it are one person's line of reasoning, and at the time I was just reading things. I wasn't recording things. I wasn't writing a paper, so I didn't really care. But the line of argument that some people will say, but it's not historically accurate in fantasy to include people of color because you're including vampires in a story about Nazi Germany, so you have to be historically accurate. But it's so hard to imagine how people of color would be in this society because it's so hard for you to imagine that there are dragons in this world that don't even exist in the real world. So as I went into writing one in fall semester, I decided that I really wanted to be able to include this diversity in my work where I hadn't consciously been trying to in the past, and to kind of answer my own limitations and challenge myself a little bit further. So I drew on some of my loves from my childhood. I loved, when I was in the 4th grade, I wanted to be an Egyptologist because, you know, that's what you do when you're in elementary school. You love random things. So I decided that I would build this fantasy world with dragons and base it around Fertile Crescent cultures, but fantasy world so it's not historically accurate because it's fantasy, just like Westeros is based off of kind of European concepts, but it's fantasy, so it doesn't need to adhere to things. But it'd be populated with dark-skinned people living in a desert with a complicated empire that was just fabulous, and there were dragons. And so now I'm just going to read the prologue, which hopefully you will enjoy. In the beginning, all of existence was a sea of chaos. I knew the words well, words spoken each season, These were the words I expected to greet me when I rose from the purifying waters of the grotto. My brother would be the storyteller in the solstice, and he practiced every day. I could hear his inflection, his own voice, in each line of the story as I waited. He was looking forward to being the one to lead me on my divine course this season, and so was I. But chaos is an agent of change. Chaos fights stagnation. Chaos would cease to be itself if it remained a sea. I'd been waiting a long while, long enough for the cool air to set into my skin and form goosebumps, for the eerie blue light that filtered through the water into the grotto to grow dim. It shouldn't have taken this long. Another priestess of Kemen should have come for me by now. This part of the purification ceremony should have been completed before sunset. I couldn't just sit there. Stagnation wasn't in my nature. So the Sea of Chaos gave birth. 2 gods and 2 goddesses emerged from the water, the divine 4 who shaped our red, slowly. I stepped into the water, my heart racing when I expected to be calm. I knew this ceremony. I knew every word and every motion. I knew how it would balance the potential in my blood between the cardinal points of the divine 4. There was nothing to be afraid of. My brother was out there, and he'd always watch over me. I waited until the water was up to my waist, then dove forward, swimming through the submerged neck of the grotto into the cistern, then upward. Nupet, the god of order, took to the air on silver wings, where he would survey all of creation with his golden eyes. Once my head and shoulders emerged from the water, thick smoke stung at my face. I pulled my wet tunic up over my nose and mouth, at least so I could breathe, and slowly waded toward the shore, droplets falling from my tight helixes of hair. Why was there smoke? Roses, goddess of chaos, stalked the land as a lioness stalks her prey, fiery goddess of the hunt. I stepped out of the water. Sand caked around my feet and between my toes with every step I took toward the blazing flames. The whole temple complex glowed bright red against the dark night sky. When I came to the first still form, the disbelief in my chest froze my lungs. The elder had fallen face first into the sand and died there. I didn't stop to move him to know who he was. My gaze lingered on the 3 deep gashes that had slain him. Lion's claws? This hadn't been a hunt. It had been a slaughter. Abscess, goddess of order, shaped the land and its creatures with love and a healer's touch. My mind clung to the words, to my brother's voice. Nothing was right. He should have been here telling the story. Where was he? The fire that had taken hold of the temple fogged the disbelief within me, and my lungs began to burn. I stumbled forward, past the fallen elder and so many other bodies. Kemen, god of chaos, flowed as a dragon, in rivers and winds, as storm, as flood. A long metal bolt stood out from the chest of a dragon. I placed my hand on the scales of her throat. It took an expert marksman to slay a temple-raised dragon with one arrow. But beyond her, there were many more dragons, all slain with single arrows, as if by a falcon. But that made no sense. There, my brother's dragon. I rushed to his side, uttering a prayer to Kemen to find my brother alive. But I only found his body, bright red blood staining his upper skin. I fell down next to him, wailing. As I did, rain began to pour from the sky. I could still hear his voice. Chaos had birth to wallow, and when life ended, chaos would plague it.
Great. So our final presenter today will be Joshua Jasper.
Hello. I'll try to go after that. Mine's a little bit more traditional, and I'm talking about library publishing as well as its intersections with open access and academic presses, and the landscape of library publishing today is fascinating and complicated, as we've learned with a few of the other presenters today, and there's open access, print on demand, digital publishing collaboration, and work that I did with retired Professor Robin Peake was to investigate the intersection between the publishers and the libraries within academic campuses. And we had thought that the membership in certain professional and advocacy organizations together would cause the libraries at an academic campus to be more likely to collaborate with the associated academic presses than those that do not have those affiliations. And in fact, the state of the landscape is much more complicated and variable. So first of all, what I did was I collected data from every academic publisher in the United States and Canada, as well as data on their campus associations, which, by the way, isn't so much. It's only around 100 for all of the United States and Canada, so it's not an impossible task. And the data was collected from their websites, as well as the directories of a few of the organizations and elsewhere. And so as you can see, it's all self-reported data, and it was incredibly variable what they reported on. And I found that big publishers tended to underreport and small publishers tended to overreport. But nevertheless, I found a few things. First of all, that the scholarly publishing is not really a single industry, but 4 or 5, because the very large or huge publishers did very different things than the small publishers. And I found that the most interesting and dynamic situation was occurring with the medium-sized publishers, which I would like to investigate further. And their future role is not yet fully clear, and so they're going in a lot of very interesting directions. But amongst those medium-sized presses, I wanted to see the likelihood that they would collaborate with the libraries that are trying to publish right now, because that's a very big movement. And what I found is that the data seems to suggest that the biggest 2 factors that would predict the likelihood of library and publisher collaboration were the proximity of geography and the size and internal structure of the campus as a whole. So however close in proximity the publishing house is to the physical building of the library is the likelihood that they would think to collaborate with each other. And so examples where they're far removed from the library, either geographically or institutionally, they wouldn't really work together. And then the libraries, when they want to start publishing in the various ways that libraries have been trying to, they essentially reinvent the wheel because they don't realize that there's someone right over there that's already doing that and already affiliated with your institution. And so 2 examples of that include Florida, and SUNY, where the publishing house for SUNY is a completely separate division, and so they're not really connected with any of the campuses. And the University of Kentucky is an example where they collaborate a great deal with one campus because that's where their office is located, and they don't really affiliate with any of the other campuses. And so insofar as there wasn't any connection between membership in certain organizations and whether or not they're working together, I had to conclude that the memberships to advocacy organizations, such as Spark and LPC, represented a desire to go in this direction without necessarily a full understanding of what that direction is or where it would lead, rather than necessarily representing a direction that they're already going in or actions that they've done. And I've also found that pre-existing collaboration and proximity between groups is the best indicator for further collaboration, which I think is a lesson that we can take even outside of looking at academia to working relationships between people. Thank you.
Great. So we have plenty of time for questions of any of the panelists or all of the panelists. Yes.
This is for Grace. So a part of the fan base of Night Vale sees Cecil as like an unreliable narrator. Like, he says things that are oftentimes probably wrong or probably incorrect. How does that affect the listener's relationship with him intimately, you know?
I think it probably depends on the context. In the case, people, for the most part, a lot of the time, people, acknowledge that he's an unreliable narrator, that, he'll embellish on particular things, or he'll make it very clear that he doesn't like particular people, Steve Carlsberg. But in other cases,
particularly in the Strex arc, that's one arc that I want to look into, and I couldn't as much because of time and because the arc wasn't finished when I was writing the paper. But there are moments when you don't know how reliable or unreliable. For the most part, you do know that, and that's part of the relationship. But in other cases, that can be called into question, and that's actually one of the things I'm very interested in looking into. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the name wrong for Nathaniel Gannon.
That's an Elganin.
I got it wrong first.
Sorry, I got the name wrong. Well, I'd like you to maybe talk a little bit about how you intend to pilot Netflix, because you said it's not live yet. So I was wondering how are you going to? Is it fully populated, and how are you going to do trials at school?
So it is live in the sense that it's currently accessible on the actual server. Just the URL is not linked from anywhere. I'm currently testing it with the student employees at the library, and they're my little guinea pigs. I'm having them run through sometimes just free usage and seeing what works, what doesn't. Clicking this, did it bring up what you expected? What is there data that you thought would be there but wasn't there? And then having them and some guided searches, asking them to find a specific movie, asking them to see how would you find things written by so and so. But it is fully populated with. I get a report every month from my supervisor with the 1 month's latest films that we've added to the collection, and then it usually takes me about a week or so to enter them all in, to be ready to be accessed. So when we're ready to roll it out, which will be June, we're gonna have a little promotional campaign and flyers and such, and let people know that it's there.
So I had a question about two questions actually. So one was how if this will link with the regular catalog, once you're once you're gone, how will it be maintained?
Yes. The last part was the thing that everybody above me was concerned about. So each one of those movie boxes that looks like a cover is just a direct link. You click that, boom, you're at the catalog for that specific film, so you can see. Because the one thing it doesn't have, Netflix is beautiful. It can't tell you if it's checked in or not. So because that would require, I'm not a computer guy. I don't know what it would require. So you click it, boom, now you're in the catalog in a new tab. You still have the old thing still there. You can keep browsing. And as far as the maintenance, as part of my indexing project, and right now 419, I'm doing a lot of documentation on how I did what I did and how to continue doing what I've done, and adding a lot more notes and documentation on how to keep it up. The bottom line is, if I leave, it'll probably fall apart because there's some weird things that even I don't remember how I got them to work. But it all started as just me saying, "Can I do this?" And they're like, "Okay, go." So it's not necessarily a great model how to do things in your big fancy institutions as much as it was a pet project of mine. They're not here.
I have a question for you as well, in that you have look like very extensive sub-genreing.
Yes.
Did you just make all those up? Did you base that off of somebody else's genreing? How did you?
So this is also part of my the 419 project, which check back in 6 months when I'm done with that, and it'll be really interesting. I'm now working on a flattened structure, there's actually 3 levels of genre, subgenre, and what I call sub-subgenre. And when faced with the idea of having to assign genres to 3,500 movies, I said, is there a database that already exists that has assigned genres to those movies? There is. It's called Netflix. So I copied and pasted. It required a tremendous amount of work. Every single movie, I had to enter it into Netflix, copy them, clean up all the data, and then put it in the XML. So yeah, it's just Netflix's genres, except that I would tweak anything that didn't make sense, that Netflix was just bad, because they have metadata people who are perhaps incompetent, and they would assign they assign things like African American drama to any movie with a X number of black people, even if it wasn't American, like movies that were taking place just in Africa, and so I did a lot of data cleanup on that side.
paid by Netflix to do it. I actually had a small question about the branding of your Mflix.
Don't tell them. I don't know if it's legal, but I didn't ask.
Other questions?
Questions, well, no.
Well, so I have a question, and it's actually for all of you. Basically, the way this session was pitched was kind of a in-process kind of thing and I love the range. I love from the creative work on down to the nuts and bolts, information science, study, research kind of thing, and everything in between. What was it like to envision talking about a project that you're not done with, right? That you're in the middle of? What did that feel like for you, and what were some of the challenges, and potentially what are some of the opportunities? I'm such a teacher, I'm sorry.
Speaking for myself, the hard part is kind of narrowing down, because it's like you want, because it seems like everything is really important, because you don't have the bulk of your research, or you have varying degrees of bulk of research, and some things might turn over to be really important that you're not really thinking about right now, or the stuff that you're really excited about might fall to the background. So there's a lot of flux there that's kind of a little bit scary.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to present it as it's something polished, but also acknowledge that.
Yeah, no, we'll go down the line.
I'm not nearly in a position to actually run a summer reading program at a library. I'm years away from doing that. But I have my kids who I can experiment on. So it's really
So does Netanel, apparently.
So having something in progress is great, because I get to think, well, I'll try that this summer and see if they like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, when I do, am in a position to influence the program structure at a library, I'll have some ideas.
Great. Josh?
So, I wanted to jump off of what Grace said and say that I completely agree. Knowing what to include and what not to, and ironically we have the least amount of time to talk, was very difficult, because in my case at least, I did all of this research last year with Professor Peak, and I just have all of this information that I just pulled from all over the place on academic presses, and then, she says, all right, you got plenty. What are the conclusions? And it's like, well, I don't know, this looks like a mess of data. And so, so to know what's important and what's not important is sort of, it's implied that since that's the work in process part for me, in that I don't know what's important or not. I know where in the data I should be looking, but I'm not necessarily certain what the data means yet. And so, to be told, you should sound more certain in your work in progress presentation is kind of an oxymoron in some sense.
I guess I'll go. For me, the biggest challenge was, so the end product of my independent study is hopefully going to be some sort of practically applicable solution to this problem that places like Harvard and MIT have thrown years and millions of dollars into and not really made a ton of headway into. They made a lot of progress and they've shared their results, which is great, but it's definitely something that we're figuring out all together if no one has the solution yet. But I'm way away from there, and I'm trying to keep my expectations reasonable given that context. And so this was actually a really good way for me to sort of think about the broader context of like, why should we even be doing this? What are the contexts that we're working in here? And so I think it's really good sometimes when you're working with highly technical stuff to be forced to take that step back and say like, okay, what's the bigger picture here? Or else you get kind of stuck in this myopic view of just what you're doing. And it was also great because it gave me a break from, so I mentioned STEP, the ISO standard. It happens to be the largest one in existence. There's 590 parts and 18 technical addenda. So I'm way over my, so it was nice to be able to step back from that and like kind of go broader picture for a little while.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned risk, because we do often, and this is true just in the educational process as a whole, we're constantly being forced to take risks and put ourselves out there and kind of be measured up, and not in a bad way, but And you're putting yourself out there and your ideas, particularly with creative work. So that terrifies me to think about. I'm never reading a story ever. But that's so cool that we do that in the education environment. But I think Tim's observation about stopping for a minute and being forced to actually talk in front of people and have something to say is also kind of helps you step back and maybe not fall down those rabbit holes so much. So it was really great, really rewarding. And by the way, none of you went over 7 minutes. I think the shortest was 3.5. So bravo on that and timekeeping. Are there other questions from the audience? All right. Well, thanks very much for the day. We really appreciate it.